Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving deep, you guessed it, into your stack of research and articles.
Buckle up.
We're talking about the fascinating evolution of Chinese restaurants right here in America.
The journey from those bustling Chinatowns we all know and love.
To those Chinese takeout spots,
Oh, yeah?
the ones popping up in, every town these days. Get ready to have your mind blown.
It's about way more than just the food.
Oh, I bet.
Though that's definitely a delicious, delicious bonus. This deep dive reveals some wild, wild economic patterns, cultural adaptations, and even, wait for it, the surprising role of Chinatown buses.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. Chinatown buses, hidden connections, surprising facts. I am so in it. Let's unpack this. So we've got excerpts here from a book called From Chinatown to Every Town.
Right.
And it really does seem like every town does have a Chinese restaurant these days. What makes this such a fascinating story?
Well, you're right. They are everywhere. The book really dives into how these Chinese restaurants are, strategically expanding beyond traditional Chinatowns,
Okay.
driven by immigrants seeking new opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
A lot of these entrepreneurs, they stay deeply connected to Chinatown, even when their restaurant is, hundreds of miles away.
So even though they're branching out, Chinatown is still, the heart of it all.
Exactly. Think of it like the mothership. The book talks about how entrepreneurs rely on businesses in Chinatown for everything.
Everything.
From specialized cookware to those iconic menus we see everywhere to even sourcing workers through employment agencies.
Wow.
It's like this hidden network that keeps everything running.
Wow. That's incredible. I never even thought about it. I just assumed.
Right.
Yeah. It's like its own little ecosystem.
Exactly. And it gets even more fascinating when you consider the logistics of it all.
Hold up. Are we about to talk about Chinatown BUSCS?
Yeah.
Those super affordable ones everyone's used at some point.
You got it. They are a surprisingly vital part of this whole network.
Really?
The book describes how they transport workers, but they also link Chinatowns across cities, which facilitates this flow of goods, services, and even religious practices.
Wow.
Think of it as the circulatory system for this whole network, pumping life into these businesses all across the country.
This is blowing my mind. It's like we think of these restaurants as these individual businesses, but they're really part of this intricate web,
Right.
all stemming from Chinatown.
And that interconnectedness has major implications for how these businesses operate and the challenges that they face.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not just about serving up delicious food.
Right.
It's about navigating this really complex web of cultural expectations, economic realities, even racial dynamics.
Okay, now I'm really hooked. Let's dive into those challenges.
Yeah.
What are some of the things these entrepreneurs face when they venture out from the familiar territory of Chinatown?
Well, imagine leaving that bustling heart of Chinatown and setting up shop in a town where maybe you don't speak the language fluently yet, or
right.
people have totally different cultural expectations around food and dining.
It's like stepping into a whole new world.
Exactly. And the book actually tells this really interesting story about a woman named Lisa Zhang. She's a restaurant owner in Corpus Christi, Texas.
Okay.
And she shared that, even though her restaurant was doing really well,
Yeah.
she still relied super heavily on Chinatown for supplies and even workers.
Wow.
It just highlights how crucial that network is, especially when you're starting a business so far from any established Chinatowns.
That's a really powerful example.
Yeah.
It's not just about recreating dishes. It's about rebuilding your entire support system
Yeah.
from the ground up. The book also mentions something called hao kuei.
Right.
What does that mean? And how does it play into all of this?
A hao kuei.
Mhm.
So hao kuei is really fascinating. It basically translates to a good place to do business and raise a family. And for these entrepreneurs, those two things are deeply intertwined.
Right.
They're analyzing economic indicators, of course, like income levels and unemployment rates,
Yeah.
but they're also prioritizing things like safety and a sense of community.
So it's about finding a place where their business can thrive, but also where their kids can, feel safe and connected.
Yeah,
Yeah, create a good life, not just a profitable one.
exactly. And that sense of community is so, so important.
Yeah.
The book actually shares some really heartwarming stories about how these entrepreneurs are bridging cultural divides in their new communities.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by those stories of connection and understanding.
Okay, well, there's this one story from Philadelphia.
Okay.
A Chinese restaurant owner there hired a local, like an elderly woman, to just
Yeah.
be a presence in the restaurant.
Oh, wow.
She didn't even want payment.
Really?
But her presence there helped ease any tension with teenagers in the area and fostered this feeling of connection with the community.
That's amazing. Such a simple act, but it speaks volumes about building relationships.
Right. And it shows how these entrepreneurs aren't just setting up shop, they're weaving themselves into the fabric of their new communities.
Like those Cheers episodes, right?
Yeah.
Where everybody knows your name. It's more than just the food, it's the feeling of belonging.
Exactly. And that resonates with people no matter their background.
Right.
But speaking of backgrounds, the book also talks about how the diversity of Chinese immigrants in the U.S. is expanding.
Okay.
And guess what they're using as an indicator?
Oh, now you've got me on the edge of my seat. What is it?
Hometown associations.
Hometown associations. Okay, you're going to have to break that down for me.
Okay, so these are organizations that help immigrants from specific regions in China connect with each other and maintain ties to their hometown.
Oh, they got it.
They're like little pockets of shared heritage.
Okay, so the book is using these as like a way to track where everyone is coming from.
Yeah.
That's really clever.
And what they found is that the number of hometown associations representing different provinces has exploded in recent years.
Wow.
Which suggests a huge increase in diversity. And that diversity is starting to have a real impact on the food itself.
Oh, this is what I've been waiting for. So how is all of this diversity changing the Chinese food we're seeing on menus across America? This is making me hungry. It's like the evolution of American Chinese food is like happening right before our eyes. But it also makes you wonder, with all these regional cuisines coming in, is there a concern about authenticity?
Right.
Is that even the right way to think about it?
That's a great question. And, the book doesn't get into that debate directly.
Okay.
But it does highlight how these entrepreneurs are constantly adapting, not just their recipes, but their whole approach to running a business in a new place.
So it's less about sticking to some rigid definition of authenticity and more about finding that sweet spot between honoring traditions, but also appealing to local tastes.
Exactly. It's a delicate dance,
Yeah.
and these entrepreneurs are doing it all. Adjusting menus, navigating local regulations, hiring practices,
Right.
even dealing with the complex dynamics of race and ethnicity in their new communities. It's a real testament to their resilience and their drive to build a good life, both for themselves and for their families.
It really is. And speaking of challenges, it feels important to acknowledge that this book was published before the pandemic.
Right.
And the rise in anti-Asian sentiment that we've seen recently.
Yeah.
I can only imagine how much tougher things must have gotten.
Absolutely. And while the book doesn't cover those specific events,
Right.
it does provide a framework for understanding, their potential impact.
Okay.
For example, it talks about how economic downturns can sometimes heighten tensions between immigrant groups and local communities.
So it's like those existing challenges, the competition, the cultural differences were just amplified by the pandemic and, the rise in anti-Asian sentiment.
Right. It's definitely a possibility. And we can't ignore the emotional toll this takes on, individuals, families, and entire communities. It adds a whole other layer of complexity to an already really challenging situation.
This is heavy stuff, but it feels so important to talk about. Are there any insights from the book that could help us understand how these communities might be coping with these new challenges?
Despite all the challenges, the book emphasizes the incredible resilience of Chinese immigrants and their remarkable ability to adapt. It also highlights the crucial role of those support networks we talked about earlier.
Right.
The hometown associations, the churches, the business connections as sources of strength and solidarity in tough times.
So even when things get really, really difficult, they have each other to lean on.
Exactly. These networks offer a sense of community, shared experience, and practical support. It's like a collective safety net, helping individuals and businesses weather the storm.
That's really inspiring. It makes you realize that behind every Chinese restaurant, there's a whole story. A story of family, hard work, resilience, and cultural adaptation. And that story is still being written.
Absolutely. It's a story that's constantly evolving, with new chapters being written every day. And the ending, well, that's up to all of us to shape.
This has been such a thought-provoking deep dive. So after uncovering all of this, what's the key takeaway you hope our listener walks away with today?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the next time you see a Chinese restaurant, take a moment to appreciate the intricate web of connections it represents.
Okay.
The ties to Chinatown, the entrepreneurial spirit, the resilience in the face of adversity. It's a reminder that even in our increasingly globalized world, cultural heritage runs deep, and seemingly ordinary places can reveal extraordinary stories.
Beautifully said. And that's why we deep dive, right? We uncover those hidden connections, those aha moments that make you see the world with fresh eyes. And for you listening, here's some food for thought. If Chinatown's influence stretches so far, are we witnessing the birth of a new kind of American cuisine? One that blends those classic Chinese flavors with local ingredients and tastes. Keep an eye on those menus, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.